Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. I know it's been a while since my last tutorial. It's been a few months. There's been some stuff happening in my life, but I'm back and I want to keep posting to help you guys out. I just want to say thank you everybody for all the support, all the subs during my absence. You guys have been, a lot of you have been subbing and watching my older stuff, and I hope you guys are learning something new every tutorial, as that is the goal. One other thing I want to say, I am thinking about potentially selling, not the tutorial, because I want to always keep those free for you guys, but selling the finished graphs and probably just having the textures attached to it as well. I know some of you don't have all the time, because I know my tutorials are pretty long, so that'll give some of you an option. And I'm thinking about $5 each and potentially 10 or so for tutorials like this one, the one that we're going to be working on today, because this one's actually pretty large. So let me know what you guys think about that. But like I said, I'm going to keep doing these free tutorials from beginning to end. I'm not going to be hiding anything. Whatever you see in the YouTube video is going to be exactly what's going to be in the the paid version. I'm not sure how I'm going to go about that. It's going to be Patreon or just going to be selling them individually, or however. Just something I've started thinking about, because I know I've had one person ask me, and there aren't many of you, so one of you is a large amount of you. All right, and then last thing, as usual, let me know what you guys want to see. If you guys have any material ideas or something that you haven't seen done before or stuff like that, let me know. I might do it. I know I've done some requests from people in the comments before, and there aren't many of you, so if you comment, I will see it many times. Things like in Unreal, Marmoset, I do know how to use Blender. I do my 3D modeling there. And then I am thinking about doing a gaming channel, which will be separate, so don't worry. I'm not going to taint your Precious Substance Designer channel or Game Dev channel with gaming, but just a heads up if you guys are interested. Maybe I'll play your favorite game. And then last thing is, let's get started. So what you're seeing here is going to be the base material that we're going to be using for the rest of the Victorian interior. I forgot what I was going to say, but I think we're fine. So this is going to be the prereq. If you have your own wooden texture, like a stylized wooden texture or something, you'll be able to use this and follow along. But it has to be like a base wood. So there aren't any like boards or any planks or anything like that. So this is going to be the finished result. This was rendered in Marmoset Toolbag 4. I'm not on the new one just yet. So there's only going to be 3 outputs. There's going to be base color, normal, and roughness, because this is basically flat. We're not worried about height. We don't have any metallic in our wood. So it's just going to be those 3 channels. Oops. There we go. Okay, so here's just another like a roughness focused render, so you can see the amount of detail. This actually is not very complicated, and it's not very large. The large stuff will come here. This is what part 1 with height and stuff is going to be about. I think there's like 4 total textures that will be coming, soon. So we're going to have a ceiling texture, as you can see up here. We're going to have a floor texture. Some of this is still a work in progress. I'm not very happy with the floor. This render is a work in progress. I'm just giving you guys a little preview. We're going to have 3 versions of the wall. It's going to be just like a normal wall. We're going to have the door version, and we're going to have a window version. So we have floor, door, window, wall, and ceiling. And then I think I might add this pattern to this video. I'm not sure, or maybe I'll just leave it for later. Because because the pattern was not really the main focus, but I wanted to do something for like the wallpaper. And then we do have some cool stuff in the future tutorial, not in this one. This was just going to be focused on the base wood. This is all the wood that you see here is using the same wood that I just showed you previously. Something I ended up like getting a little carried away with is having like a not really a animation per se, but you'll be able to swing the door open, or the illusion of the door swinging open, and it's like pitch dark, so you'll see kind of like the darkness creeping over the door, kind of like if you've played the older Resident Evils, in the loading screens when you would open the door, and some of you might know what I'm saying. And then we have rain on the window, and we'll have a drop down where you'll be able to switch between wall, door, and window, but that'll be in the next few tutorials, or in the next few parts. All right, so let's go back. Let's hop right into Substance Designer. Oh, but before we do that, let me just show you this. So I just wanted to show you guys real quick. You can see over here in my marmoset, I have my floor, my ceiling, door, wall, window, and then I have two windows, one's for rain and one's for not rain. And you'll be able to swap them out as you like. But if I fly around, you can see it's all just like, and these guys here are there to cover some like leaks, some light leaks. But yeah, it's all just planes. It's all texture. Nothing here is geometry. I think I might do geometry for the doorknob, but we'll see. But yeah, everything here is texture, and you know, that'll be to come. So let's hop right back into Substance Designer. All right, as usual, you should all be getting into the habit of gathering references before getting started. Without any references, you'll be left guessing, what do I do next? Because you don't have a reference of what you're making. So since you probably didn't invent wood, it's hard to know for you every single detail of wood, because there are so many different woods and you're not sure which one you're doing. Like, is your wood going to look like this, or is it going to look like this, or is it going to look like this? And some of these are AI, I believe. Yeah, like these look fake, but it was just about design. But anyways, I've already ranted enough. This one's mainly my inspiration for the Victorian interior. I like homes like these. I think these are very cool. And then here I have some base wood references, just to kind of give me some idea of what I'm trying to do. And here you can see the ambient occlusion, the base color, displacement, opacity, metallic, normal, and roughness, just to get an idea. And then I'll be talking about, this is just for the future stuff. But anyways, make sure you have references. And then here we're seeing the finished graph. It's not much. It's all going to be done in this tutorial. We're going to go pretty quick. So there you can see it in the viewport. Some housekeeping stuff. As usual, I'm going to go around and disable everything, and I'm going to show you exactly every single graph and every single value or slider. We are using a height scale of 0.05, and we are, actually, you probably don't even need this, honestly. We'll be using just the normal plane, so you don't need the high res because we're not using any height information. And I think that's it. All right, I'm going to disable everything, and we're going to start with, I guess this is technically height, but we squish it. So our normal, height / normal will be first, and then we'll go base color, and then we'll go roughness, and then it should be done pretty quickly. All right, I'm going to disable everything, and I'll be right back. All right, we're back. Alrighty, I did rearrange this a little bit just to make it easier to read, so it'll look a little different than when just before I paused, but it should be a big deal. Alrighty, so the first thing is we're going to be working on the wood grain. That's the most important thing. So we're just going to start with a gradient linear 1, and then we're going to use a transform 2D here to rotate it 90 degrees. You can use this button right here. 90 CW. Clockwise. That's what it was. Okay, cool. And then we're going to use a curve node to make this shape. And I know how annoying it is when people in other tutorials use these curve nodes because they never go over the numbers. But we do that in this channel. I give you guys all the numbers so you can have the exact same thing. Anyways, we got 0.81 for the top, and then how far out is just 0.1. And then this guy should, in theory, be all the way 1 and 0. Pretty simple, nothing too crazy. And then you can play around. You can play around with this curve if you'd like and do your own. But basically, what we're trying to do here is just kind of give our gradient a little bit more of an interesting. Don't mind that it's inverted. That's not the main. That wasn't the main purpose. But if you can tell here, it kind of ramps up and then it goes down, and that's obviously because of our curve node. We'll be using a lot of curve nodes in the overall, in the totality of our of this tutorial. Not this one, but the whole Victorian interior stuff, especially in the height. We do a lot of cool things in there. All right, so then we're going to do a tile random grayscale, and we're going to plug in our curve into our pattern input. And then we're going to do X amount 100, and then 1 for the Y amount. So we get a bunch of little gradients. And then we play around with some of the values here, like random X size. So some are thinner than others, as you can see. Our scale is set to 1.1. Now this is important because if you don't do 1.1, if I recall correctly, you get a gap, and that'll make your stuff look funky later. So 1.1 is the sweet spot so that it continues on to tile. So make sure if you're looking weird, make sure you remember this point in the video. I think everything else is the same. And feel free to usually when I'm done or I think I'm getting close to the end, then I'll come back and I'll play around with stuff to see if I can get better results. Because once things are set up and they start working together, it's easier to make changes. All right, so then that guy gets plugged into a directional warp. So I'm gonna enable this. And the settings here are 125 intensity. And then we're gonna do an anisotropic noise. X amount 2, Y amount 25, smoothness 0.52, and smoothness interpolation 0.35. And then we blur it. Oops, let me go over here. By 10, just a default blur. Make sure your quality is set to 1, or your graph breaks. And then we plug that into the intensity input of that directional warp we just made. Now I don't know why I have these guys turned off. I think I was probably playing around with it and noticed. Oh, well, yeah, because I'm disabling everything. Duh. Sorry. You know, it's been a while since my last tutorial, guys, okay? Bear with me. So then here we have a transform 2D just to rotate it 90 degrees. You can also use a safe transform if you like, if you want to be safe. And then we do a slight blur. Of 0.175. Then you're going to plug that into a warp, normal warp, and then set the intensity to 0.5. And then we're going to work on this down here. We're going to have a tile generator grayscale, and we are going to do X amount of 2, Y amount 12, pattern paraboloid. What else is different? What else is different? Size random is different. Maybe some of this stuff here is different. Just make sure you compare. Pause the video here. We make some changes to the positive random just to kind of get these lines where they're thick and then they thin out. And then we change the blending mode. I don't remember what it's normally set to. I think it might be max, but just in case it's not, set it to max. And then luminance random 0.33, and then random mask here. Once you have done that, plug that into a warp. Set to 0.05. And then we're going to do a normal, just a purlin noise set to 40. And then we're going to clamp it to kind of get these flat tops. And then that'll help warp what we just made. It'll give us these guys. And then we're going to blur it. They're going to give us some deformation, and it's not like this. And then we're going to create our first our first portal here, we're just going to call this one noise custom 01. And if you don't know how, or if you're using an old version of Substance Designer, this will not be available to you, in which case you're going to have to just wherever you see this portal, you're going to have to just drag it out from here. Maybe give yourself a little note by making a little comment here, or sometimes these are hard to see. Do this guy, and then like maybe label this noise. I can't type like that, so you remember every time you see this being used, it's this guy here. So maybe do that if you don't have it. Otherwise, if you do have the ability to do this, but you've never done one before, just hit spacebar to bring up the menu and just do .node, and then assign it a name. And then when you need to use this later on, like I do right here, you can just spawn in another .node and then find that new one. So AD as dash, whatever. Or what I like to do is just click, hold, and drag out, and then press Alt, and then you can do a connection. You can also do them in between. But yeah, if you need help with that, let me know in the comments. Anyways, yes, our first one, we're going to call this one noise underscore custom 01, just so you know where it is. Then here, I'm going to turn this on. We're going to do a blend mode, set the copy and just 1, so your average blend mode. We're going to do a gradient linear 1 here. We're going to increase the tilings to 16. And then we're going to do a bit of a blur, 0.5. And then we're going to use the gradient dynamic node, and we're going to use our noise custom 01 and plug that into the top input, and then our blurred gradient linear 1 is going to go into our bottom input. Now everything, make sure this is set to vertical for the gradient orientation, and then that is going to go into the top, into the foreground of the blend. And then we need something for the opacity, so we're going to take that noise custom 01 and we're going to play around with the levels here. Oh goodness, I didn't do nice numbers. Let me fix these up for you guys. So there you can see the values, and then that will go into your opacity, and then we'll basically what we're doing here is we're merging these guys with these guys, so these guys are going to be visible wherever there's white. So for example, you see this guy and these guys overlap. So here they're going to appear here, and they're going to go on top of what's below it, which is this. Just to kind of get our wood grains, get some variation. And obviously you could do more and more variation and stack. And then we're going to do some more warping, some directional warping here. And then we're going to do a directional noise 3. And then we're going to call this directional noise 3 because I think we use it one other time just to keep our graphs efficient. And we're going to call this noise directional noise 3, because that's the number of the node. And then x1 just means scale, so times 1. And then 0, 0 means if there's 2 of these, then this one would be called 0, 0, and then this one would be called 0, 1. Just so you know what all this means. Or you can, if you have your own naming conventions, go wild. But that's what this convention means. And yeah, that I continued from the stone wall tutorial. Alright, so once we do our directional warping here, we go from this to kind of give it some waviness. Then we do another directional warp to kind of give it some more frequency. And for that, we take our directional noise 4, and again, we make a portal for it, and we call it directional noise 4, 1 scale. It's the first one. Should probably do 0, 1, but anyways. And then we don't need one for this one because this is the only place where we use a directional noise 2. And then we use noise custom 1 that we made earlier from the blur here. And then that one goes into the opacity. Directional noise 2 goes in the background, and directional noise 4 goes into the foreground. And then this is just at the copy and 1. Nothing crazy, just trying to get some, because this was kind of like larger pieces, and this is more high frequency. So I just wanted to have some larger chunks mixed in with the little ones. And then we use that to directional warp, and you can play around with these settings yourself. But I have it set to 180, so it goes left to right to keep in line with the grain of the wood. And then here we do a directional warp again, set to 55 intensity. And then here we just take a normal Perlin noise and I reduce it to a scale of 4. And then I change the output size up here in the top right to -1. So from that, which is square, to that, because then that kind of gives me a better result. It gives me like a more, it's basically squishing the noise. So you can see the difference there. Now, if you play around with this, make sure you're not messing up your overall resolution here. Because you can see here it's 1K by 2K. You want to make sure you're always at 2K, 2K, because we are working with textures and they're always perfect squares. All right. Next, we have a levels node here. Oops, I forgot to do the thing here as well. So we'll do, this one's 0.46875. For this one, we'll just do 0.61, 0.5, 1, and 0. And then that is going to feed into this blend mode here, set to 0.25 copy. And then we have a directional noise 1. And that's going to go into the background. And then our noise 3 is going to go into the foreground, into a 0.5 blend. And that's going to go into the foreground of this guy. Now here, I think I disabled this. I think it's supposed to look like this. But we'll get there in a second. Let's go over here. We're going to take our directional warp result here and do a normal node. And then we're going to do normal to height, high quality. Just to kind of give us another noise to play with. And then we're going to directionally warp that. You can see here the settings. And then we're going to take our directional noise 4 into this levels here. Just make these nice and some nice numbers for you guys. And then we're going to use the directional blur. So it blurs in whatever angle you set it to. So if you do up, it's going to blur that way. So I want to keep the grain going the same way. I don't want like the blurring to happen going up and down or on the y-axis. Intensity of 20 for that directional blur. And then we warp it here. Then that goes into the opacity. So now let's turn this on. And then this guy here is going to plug into the middle. And it'll give us this. Now I know it looks ugly right now, but that's because later on we flatten it with a histogram range. And then this is set to 0.6. So then here we have another warp. Now here's where we're adding our knots. So if I turn this on and off, you'll see here. So the knots that you see in wood. To do that, there's many ways to do that. The one the way I chose was to use the tile generator, and I did X amount 6, Y amount 12. I used the bell pattern. And you can pause here and see what's different. I think I play around with the scale random, position random, just try to get them scattered. Luminance random, some are darker than others, and then random mask. And then I did max blend mode just in case some of them overlap. I think that's it. And then I blurred a little bit. And then I do a portal and I call this one height knots, and we'll be using that in a little bit. And then I warp by 0.1. And it's obviously it's warping based on these guys. Then here I do an auto levels just to get the full range of the height information so far. And then here we do a histogram range, and then this is where we start flattening it. So we use 0.25 and 0.5. And yeah, you can see here we start flattening it. So we go from this to this. And we're going to be flattening it some more as we go. Now here we're going to hold off because we need an input that we have to come down here and create. But first, actually no, we can do it now. Okay, so from the histogram range, you're going to do a portal and we're going to call this noise wood base. So this is basically our base for our wood. And then hold off on this. We're going to go work on this right now. So we're going to, below it, we're going to just move down a little bit. We're going to use a dirt 5. Then we're going to histogram scan it to kind of reduce the spread and tighten it up a little bit. We're going to use a directional warp with a directional noise 2. Just to kind of make these guys go left and right because right now they're like circular. So again, I'm just kind of using a directional warp to warp them on the x-axis. Then I blur it a little bit. And then I want to add another layer of dirt so you can see the difference here. So before and after. And I take a dirt 2. I histogram scan it. And then here, what do I do? I think I just increased the tiling. So 2, 2. And then I max lighten them. And I do 0.325. Otherwise, it'll look like these guys will be a lot heavier. And I kind of want them all sitting around the same height, in the height level. And then this is pretty evenly distributed. So I want to break it up. So I use a multiply blend here. And I take a Perlin noise. I auto level it for funsies, and then I blur it. Oops, I have to change this to 1. And then you can see here that it goes from this to this. That way you don't have the same even distribution across, and you have some areas where there's some voids and some more dense pockets. And then we're going to call this portal height imperfections. So now that we have this, we're going to spawn a portal here and change it to height imperfections. So search for it in here. And then that'll go in your foreground. And then from the histogram range or from this portal, you're going to plug it into the background. And we're going to enable it. And you're going to see some of the detail coming through here. So after, before, after, before, after. Now that we have this, we're going to go down here. And we're going to invert our auto levels, and then we're going to histogram scan, and then here is I'm gonna increase the tiling. I'm gonna double it, and then I'm going to max lighten it with this one. Actually, what I should do is rotate this one 180 degrees like that. That way they're not the same orientation. But I still want to keep them going from left to right. So that's why I did 180 and not 90. So then the values for that you can see here. They're just -2 instead. Alrighty. And then we do a max lighten. And then we call this guy wood grain. Very nice. And then we'll use this later on, or we'll be using it soon. Now from this blend, we are going to do another blend. And we're going to call it subtract to 0.1. And then we'll have this grunge scratches roughness, just a quick, generic, simple, nothing too fancy here. You can probably spend way more time making your own. But you can see the stats here. Just pause the video and copy those. And then that will give us our portal for our mask scratches. That's going to go into the top. And now we're adding scratch marks basically to our wood. And actually probably something I will probably do is just do like a break up the because right now they're all kind of cutting at the same depth. So what you could do is let me try something real quick. I'm gonna pause and then I'll resume. All right, we're back. So basically what we're just gonna do here is we are going to do this. Move this over here, move this up here. And this is going to go in here. And we're going to leave this guy over here. Okay, so we're going to take, I didn't change anything here. Plug that into the middle. And that's I have a prevalent noise here of scale of 16. And then I just multiply it. So we go from this, where they're all kind of cutting at the same height. And then we kind of slope some of it. So you can see here there's a bit of a fall off here. Actually, let's do 18 on the prevalent noise. Okay, and then that will go on the top. Now, I don't want my mask to be using the same information. I want my mask to be like this. That's why I didn't move this like that, or like that. All right. So now, so just a quick example here. You can see the scratch going across here. And if we turn this off, you can see that it's kind of like the same all across. But if we turn this on, there's like some variance to it. And I think we have to actually even go to 24 on this guy. Just to kind of give us some more variance. Maybe even higher, but let's try 32. Yeah, there we go. Okay, I like that better because look, before it was too small that wherever this was multiplying, it was kind of getting the whole scratch. But because our scratches are tiny, then we got to make these guys smaller. So this, if this is scratch going here, it'll start to fade out over here, but stay the same over there. And actually, let's do this. Let's do an auto, just to make sure we get our full range. I would just barely any there, but we can do that. All right, and then that'll go into here to a blend of subtract, because we're subtracting the scratches from it, to 0.1. Sorry for doing things live, or not live, I guess, but during the tutorial, I guess. Okay, and then here we flatten again. We do a histogram range of 0.05 in a position of 0.5, because this is supposed to be like, flat wood, not super grainy, old, weathered wood. And, feel free to play around with it. Maybe you'd like to do 0.075 instead and have it show up a little bit more. But we'll do 0.05. And then we'll do a portal called final height. And then because we're not using height information, we're using normal information. We're going to convert this into a normal. We're going to set the intensity to 5. And then we're going to use a normal normalize to make sure that everything's good. I think I explained why we used this in a previous tutorial. And then from this one, we're going to make another portal. I'm going to call it final normal. And I say final just to show that it's like the end. And then from that final normal, we're going to plug it into our normal. And now we're done with basically our quote unquote height / normal information. Now it's very hard to see. So, if you're working and you just want to maybe jack this up to like 25. But it'll be easier to see once we add color and stuff. So let's go back to 5. Maybe we'll change it as we go, but let's go over to color now. Alrighty, so I've gone on ahead and I've disabled all the base color stuff. And we're no longer using gray. So to start, we're going to go with a noise. We're going to use our noise wood base that we made just a bit ago, right here. Oh, I should probably delete that. That color's a reminder for me that I have to do whatever's under it before I continue. Alrighty, so we're gonna use our wood base. And I know I hate these in tutorials too, because there's no way someone's gonna run through all of these values, although it is possible, but I'd be adding 20 years to this video and it's already pretty long, longer than I wanted it. So what you can do to get the closest result possible is you can pause the video here and I'll do multiple zoom ins, I guess. And then what you can do is, when you bring up your own gradient map, go to gradient editor here and then do the pick gradient, but make sure, you have this when you're doing it. And then just draw from my video like that. And that should give you something similar. Obviously, make sure you plug this in. And if it doesn't, just keep trying. So yeah, that's obviously not similar. Click that and then go here. Okay, that was not enough information. Let me zoom out a little bit. And then you can play around with this precision here and like reduce it. Obviously, if you go all the way down, you're just going to get the fewest amount of points. But just reduce it a little bit until you get somewhere where like, oh, that kind of looks like what I have. So try that. And that'll give you something very close to this. All right. So we're using this height information to get our base going here. And then I'm going to do an HSL, darken it to 0.45. This is a normal workflow that I use. And what I'm trying to do here is just kind of add some spotting just to kind of break it up a little bit. And I just use a Perlin noise here and I plug that into the opacity. And then we go from that to this. And then I put this on top to kind of, again, because right here, those spots are very obvious. So we take a directional noise 1, set the scale 4. We scan it. That goes into the opacity. And then we have an HSL version of the result, but we brighten it a little bit. And then that goes over here. Actually, I think this would look better. You know what? No, let's stick to tutorial. I don't want to start changing things now. And then that's at the copy. And then from here, we do another HSL up here. And then we do another copy blend. And then we take from the directional noise 1. And I think I rotated it 180 degrees. Again, I want to keep the grains going from left to right. And then just to make sure that it's different than this, you can just like move it a little bit, offset it. So we'll do that. And then we do a histogram scan. And then that goes into the opacity. And then we kind of add some brighter spots, very subtle ones. Now here, I add my knots color. So I don't know why I did this like that, but we're going to take our portal from height knots into a histogram scan, tighten it up a little bit. And now that it's tightened, I want to blur it back. And then we do a histogram scan here. And then we feed that into this blend mode, set to add. Because I wanted to get this like darkened center. So I add this to this. And I get this. And then that goes into the opacity. And then that's why you have like this darker, flatter area here. And then it fades out. And it's very subtle. Because I don't want it to be super, super noticeable. And then here, we just start adding some more noise to kind of break it up. Some darker spots. I'm going to take our grunge map 02. We're going to rotate it here 90 degrees. Feed that into a subtract blend into the middle. And then I'm going to take that same grunge map 2, rotate it 180 degrees this time, or 90 degrees, or I guess 270. I'm rotating it on its side, and then I'm doing 180 on top of that so that they're not aligned the same way. Also, yeah, this one is tiled. And then this one, you see the stats there. Let's do, just to make sure it's easier on you guys, like that. And then subtract those two together just to kind of break up the tiling, because you know I increased the tiling on this one by 2, so you see the tiling there. You see 4 of these little chunks here, so I want to break that up. And then I use a copy of 0.6. And then we get this. And again, it starts blending in with the knots, so that's really nice. Now, before I worry about this, let's do this step here. Again, I don't know why did I do this? It just makes it more difficult for you guys. Let me just fix this real quick. Oh, I know why I did that. Because it intercepts with that. So if you select a node, you can dock it, which saves you space. So let me just undo all that. So we take our noise wood grain portal here and we feed that into a histogram scan. And then we dock it. And then what I did here, if it's not clear, is I take the result of this and I make like a highway for it and I keep referencing it. So we take the result up there. Actually, I don't think I showed these. So for the first one is 0.425, just make it darker. And then for this one, we do 4325. And then we get these. We're basically using the low points. I think they're the low points. But yeah, we start getting some more detail. And then here, we do another blend. And I think we add some bright spots here. So you can see some brighter spots. We take the result of this blend. And we do... I guess nothing there. What we should do though is... we should rotate it 180. Like that. And then this guy... 180 as well. Alright, so sorry, let me show you the matrices here. And then for this one... And then together I'm going to subtract. And then I do a scan to tighten it up a little bit. And then feed that into the opacity. And then here we do another HSL from the same highway. And we just make it brighter. So we get that. So then that feeds into another blend here. And again, I add a little bit more bright spots. Now I do take the same HSL here. Feed that into the foreground. And then here I take a crystals 2. And then I histogram scan it. And then I subtract this grunge map of O2 from that histogram scan. To kind of get this noise here. And then I rotate it on its side again to keep in line with the wood grain. And then we do a copy. And then what I just showed you guys, we get this. And now here, if we zoom in, what is this? So they're just giving us some like super tiny details. So we take our height imperfections portal and we auto level it to make sure we're getting the full range. And then we take, this is coming from the main road. HSL, we do 0.4, so it's super dark. Feed the auto levels into the opacity. And then we get that result. Then we do another blend. And we do even smaller details. It's all about stacking details. I take the result from here. And I think I just rotate it and move it around. And then histogram scan it because I don't want the same amount. I want less of it and I want like stronger amounts. So I tighten it up. Feed that in there. And then we get these like 30 spots here. Then we add more spots. You can see there's some big ones in here. It's basically this. To do that, we take our directional noise 1 with histogram scan it. Feed that into this blend set to max lighten. And then we split off this scan into a transform 2D. Then that feeds into another subtract blend into the middle, into the background. We take a Perlin noise. We auto it. We directionally blur it to 50. Then we tighten it up, tighten up these spots. that feeds into the foreground. So now we're subtracting this from this. So then we go from that to this, just kind of, again, just to break it up. Then we do a max light in between these two to get them into one. Then I subtract, again, just to kind of break it up. And I take this result, and I think I just flip it and move it around. Yeah. And then I subtract, and then I tighten it up. Nothing special. That goes into the opacity. We take an HSL from the main root this time, and we just darken it. And then we get these guys. You can see here. Again, very subtle. I think we're about to done with color. Yeah, sweet. Now here we start adding some color to kind of like the low points in the wood grain, just to kind of give us some depth. So we take our final height portal, do an ambient occlusion, HBAO, and an RTAO. So it's like the ray tracing, and I forgot what the HB stands for. Horizon-based AO filter. There we go. This one's just more expensive and more accurate, and you can increase the samples, but it'll slow down your computer if you don't have a very good one. So I just take these two types of, you can just probably get away with just one of these, but I do both of them, and then I invert both of them, and then I histogram scan both of them. So for the HBAO, I do this histogram up here, and then for the RTAO, we do this one. And basically what I'm trying to do is just get the information between the crevices of the grain. And then I have this one be a lot tighter than this one. This one has a bit more of a fade. So then I overlap them together. And then I use that as my opacity, because I want there to be kind of like dirt in these crevices. And then I take this uniform color, and then it's pure black, which you normally don't do, but because I'm playing with the opacity, it's not true black. It's like a gray. So you can see the difference here, and it kind of grounds it out. And it gives it like a more finished look, because you can see the wood grains more. And then we just do a normal, just a curvature. So we take our final normal, a curvature Sobel, or Sobel, however you say it, into a default gradient map, just to kind of turn it into a color. Feed that into the foreground. And then we kind of just accentuate the curves. Very subtle, not too strong. It'll start looking cartoony. And then I do a sharpen of 0.2 just to kind of sharpen the wood grains. So you can see the difference there. Blurry, sharpened. And then this HSL is just here for me to change colors with at the end. So I brightened the wood up to 0.525. And here you can just do like an overall darker wood or brighter wood. And then I have my PBR base color metallic correction thingy. And obviously you don't want red, because red means it's really dark for real life material. You want to keep things green. But this is so small that no one's gonna see it. So I don't mind. See, these are super dark pixels. This is a way to check. And if I go darker, you'll see there's more and more red, because these are just unrealistic colors. This is like a PBR checker. And I think I go over how to fixing these dark pixels over in the stone height video, but it's not really needed here. Alright, so now I'm gonna disable roughness, and then we'll finish up like this. So be right back. Alright, so I've disabled everything, and it already kind of looks passable, but obviously there's more to do. Now this is the shortest part, so let's get right into it. So to start, just to kind of give us like a base, we're going to start with the noise wood base, which I think is the height. I forgot where. Oh, it's before the imperfections. But don't worry, we'll be adding those manually. So we're going to take that portal, and then we're going to invert it, because with height, white is higher, and white in roughness means that it's super rough. So I invert it because I want my deep points of my height my low points to be rough, and my high points where you know people walking over would have the most contact. I want them to be a lower value, but because it's the highest value in height, you just have to invert it. All right, so then once we invert it, that'll give us like a nice base, as you can see here. All right, sorry, my mom called me. Okay, so after that invert, we're going to do a histogram range. And just to kind of bring the roughness values closer together, because there's too much contrast right now. I want to kind of, bring it a little closer, just because it's a very shallow material. So it's not like this is like super deep where you need like that kind of difference. So I do want to keep it somewhat close. So I squish the range. That's what it's called, the histogram range. And then here, I want to start building on it. What I want to do here is, I think, what do I do here? What is this? I guess we'll find out. We'll take a uniform color up here, set it to grayscale. And then that's going to go into the foreground, and now we need our opacity. We're going to take our final height portal into an auto levels, into an HBAO. And then we do a levels here. We do our level out high to 0.125. And then we feed that into the opacity. And then what we're doing is, okay, we're just smoothing out the top where the white is, because we're subtracting. So we're making everything smoother because we're taking away roughness. Because we're doing like a Victorian interior wood, so we do want it to be a little polished. And then we add another layer here. We take this HBAO result and we invert it, because now I want to play around with the crevice ambient occlusion. So I invert it, and then I histogram scan it, but nothing changed here. This is just the default. I guess I don't even need this, so turn that off or play around with it if you'd like, if you want to tighten it up a bit. And then we have our levels here, and that goes into the opacity. And then you can see what we did here is we just added a little bit of roughness. Actually, why is this set to 0.5? This should be like lower, I think, like 0.25 maybe. Yeah, I like that better. So it's like it's a little tighter on the edges rather than being kind of like super gradient-y, because that's where dirt is gonna accumulate, right? Like against the edges. Alrighty. Okay, so this might not be exactly like what we saw in the beginning in the previous image. It'll look even better. Okay, so yeah, okay, no, wait. Let me undo that again. Okay, I think that's what this is supposed to be. Yeah, so this is the tighter one, and I did want this one to be. Okay, just wipe the last minute of your mind away, okay? Get rid of that. Let's fix this up. I remember now. I did this recently. Yeah, so I do want there to be kind of a gradient here. And then here I double up on it and then make a tighter one. So we're going to take the result from the HBAO, from the ambient occlusion here. We're going to invert it again. Or technically, I guess you could do this. But we're going to stick to the plan. Actually, no, you don't want to do that because you would do an invert. You would do this. But let's not do that. Unless you want to say performance. Anyways, we take from the HBAO. We invert it. And then we do a histogram scan of 0.25. So that's what I was trying to do here. And then we use the levels of 0.1, and then we level in mid to 0.85, feed that into the opacity, and then this is another grayscale uniform color set to 1. So then we go from this to having a little bit more emphasis on those low points, and then we do like a tighter version of it to kind of add more contrast here on the edges. Then here we take a Grunch Rough 30 just to kind of add some overall roughness noise on it to kind of add some breakup. Since this was kind of has a bit of a direction to it, then I decided to make it go left to right. So I rotated 90 degrees. Then we did a levels here. Feed that into the opacity. Have a grayscale uniform color set to 1. And then we do a copy. And then we just kind of break up the roughness. So it's not evenly glossy, I guess. So we want to have some breakup. Because people have been walking on this or touching it or just kind of collecting dust. Then here we add another layer of some more rough values here, some mild scratches and stuff. So we take a grunge map 12. I should have mentioned this in the beginning. Sometimes I will change the random seed, so keep an eye out for that. If you're like wondering why my pattern is different, I hope that doesn't ruin the graphics on you. It should still be fine. It'll just look a little different. And then we increase the tiling here, because otherwise the scratches would be too big for the ratio or the scale. And then we take a levels, feed that into the opacity, another uniform color, into a copy, and then we just get some mild scratches just to kind of break up. You can see them right there. These aren't like the scratches like that we did earlier. So these are just kind of like, I don't know, if something just kind of scratched it a little bit. They're not deep cuts. Then here I want to have some specks of like super glossy. So that's why these are like black pixels. Let me see if there's anywhere we can really notice them. Okay, here's like a chunk right here. So just to kind of add some breakup again, you want to have some extreme, some more contrasty values. So it's not all like this around. So you have some super glossy, some super rough, and then you have like your main overall look or roughness. Applies to color as well. So we have a black and white spots 2, and then we tighten it up with a scan. We subtract with a Perlin noise here into an auto levels, into a blur. You're probably thinking, why are you autoing if you're going to blur right after? And I say, mind your business. We do it this way here, okay? Like it or like it. And then here, we're going to take that blur and we're going to subtract it from our histogram scan. And then we do a levels here. This is the levels here. The level out high is what's directing how the intensity basically. So obviously that's like someone just like dropped the water on the floor. Obviously that's too drastic, unless that's what you're going for. And I think it was 0.35. Oh no, 0.325 I think was the original. So then again we subtract because we're trying to get rid of. And then here we add another layer. Oh, these are our actual scratches. So we take our mask scratches portal into 0.25, level out high on the levels. Again, another white grayscale here. Because since these are actually cutting into the wood, I wanted to be rougher in there. We're almost done. Then I just add another layer overall on top. So you can see here, it's kind of the same roughness across for the most part. And then if you just turn this on, you can see the breakup. So that makes it more visually contrasty, or adds more contrast. So we just take this grunge map 1, I play around with the settings, I increase the tiling. Now if you want to break up the tiling, you can, get another noise and then subtract or multiply to kind of get rid of like the tiling. But since it's very faint, I didn't bother, but should probably do that. And then here we go super specific for some reason. We'll just go with 0.14. Feed that into the opacity. We're set to copy here. And you can see the difference. And then we do another one here. We take our grunge leaky paint into a histogram scan. And then we rotate it 90 degrees. and then we do a levels of 1 to 5, and then we'll see the difference here. And then another white up here. And then we add our height imperfections to kind of top it all off. We take our height imperfections portal into our levels here. Feed that into the opacity with a uniform white. And then we get all these super tiny details to kind of add this nice little breakup over everything. And then I think that's it. So we go from that to that. And then you want to have this, obviously, because you're building it, it'll be its own. You can see here that I have my base wood package, my ceiling, my floor, my wall, my pattern, and then don't worry about the United Nations corners here. That is a utility node I was trying to build that I might cover in a later video as a standalone, because we do some pretty cool stuff with the next part of the tutorial, or I show you guys some new tools to how to do certain things. And that's what Substance Designer is all about, knowing what tools exist, and then if you know what exists, then you'll know how to use them and when to use them and stuff. So yeah, so that is it. If you have any questions, or if I mess something up, please let me know in the comments and I will fix it. The next part of the tutorial, since this one kind of stands on its own because it's just like a base wood, if you want to learn how to kind of make a base wood, the next tutorial will be coming out probably sometime next week. It's pretty big. But there's a lot, we do a lot. I learned a lot of new stuff in it, so I'm sure you guys can pick up something new as well. But thank you guys for watching. Sorry I was gone for a while, but we're back. Catch you guys on the next one. Peace.